Okay, so the first episode, shall we say, of In the Middlemen. The three of us here. So my name's Jonathan. We have Trevor here and Lewis as well. So just to outline what the aim of this is, it's to really kind of offer a middle perspective of China. Well, hopefully come to some kind of diplomatic middle perspective. The main reasons we want to do this is because basically at the moment, due to the virus, China's fully on the radar with many people, many media outlets. So if you go onto YouTube, you'll see a hell of a lot of videos from people who are quite anti-China, who've been established in China. For example, we have ADTV, Serpentine. Is it Trevor? Is it Serpentine Z or just Serpentine? I forget his name.
Serpentine Z.
Serpentine Z. And you know, this isn't going to be a critique of them directly, but we thought that there's some more middle ground to be spoken about, really. Well, if we can reach any middle ground. So I think for this, at first, we're going to tell you a bit about ourselves, a bit of our background, and how we ended up in China. Okay, Trevor, do you want to go first?
Sure. I am an American salesman in China. 2009, I graduated college, and I wanted to learn Chinese, and I already had my CELTA. I'd already had a concentration in teaching English as a second language. It was something I knew I wanted to get into. And I wanted somewhere where, it would be a challenge to learn the language, and that was definitely China. And I was not disappointed with the challenge of learning Chinese over 10 years. Ultimately, last year, actually, 2019, I left China and relocated back to the U.S., close to Washington, D.C. What happens in 10 years in China? We can talk about that here at Man in the Middle, but
so your main motivations, would you say your top one would be learning Chinese? Did you have any, was it a case of watching any kung fu films when you're growing up or anything like that? What kind of idea did you have about China before
Stephen Chow and Shaolin soccer?
Yeah. Did you have that misty-eyed view of
I wish I could say, but I've always, I studied Spanish and German together since high school, and I did a gap year, went to Chile to learn Spanish and studied linguistics. I've always been very interested in language and haven't had a good opportunity to really immerse myself and travel in China and Asia. But because of my gap year experience between university and high school, I wanted another type of experience, and I wanted that in China. So because of the language, I wanted the challenge. You know, they say some people, you can climb mountains, like you can climb a hill, but then you can also aim to climb Everest. And in so many ways, I think Lewis and John, you can both agree with me, Chinese as a language, coming from an English native speaking background, it is absolutely an Everest.
Yeah, some would say an insurmountable Everest for the likes of me, Trevor. So I mean, the reason why I think it's important you look at the main motives why people go to China, because you kind of see how it plays out, and also it distinguishes other reasons from why people go to other countries. You know, for example, when you talk about Asia, you have Thailand, and especially teaching in Thailand, it's the idea of going to the beach, like an extended holiday, kind of living the dream. There's not really, I think in the consciousness, there's not really many people that head off to China with the idea of living the dream. It's really like stepping out of your comfort zone. It might be financially motivated, to try and make that elusive million. But, there's not really any dreams of, living life on a beach,
Not for comfort, if that's
Not
what
for
you're saying.
comfort, yeah, not for comfort, and certainly not really. It's difficult when you say whether to improve your standard of living. I don't think many people kind of go out there with the thinking that they're going to improve their standard of living. Obviously, you've got the guys from Shanghai, you know, the big involved in the finance industry that might think otherwise. So, how about you, Lewis?
You mean why did I go to China?
Yeah, why? How did you end up in China? Let's just say. So, what happened?
Yeah, it doesn't sound too different to what Trevor said. So I did a master's in East Asian history, and I actually studied Japanese when I was doing that. And then afterwards, I realized if I wanted to continue studying history, do a PhD in East Asia, then I needed to improve my Chinese. That was at close to sort of zero level. So yeah, I originally went to China to study at university to improve my Chinese, but then whilst I was doing that, decided I was more interested in languages than I was in history. So kind of scrapped the PhD plans and ended up going back to England, doing a CELTA, and then going back and teaching English for a while I really, as Trevor said, try and surmount that mountain that is studying.
So you were 2009, right? As well. You're both 2009, or
2010.
2010. So kind of you've both done your 10-year stints, a whole decade in China. I mean, I know it should be said we know each other quite well. We've been friends for a long time.
Oh, you gave it away, John.
Yeah. So, you know, but I mean, Lewis, your story is quite interesting. You know, when it's pub chat, and the first time you told me, you know, your story of how you ended up in China.
Go on then. How did I tell it in the pub, John?
Well, you told me you took great offence. You scored quite low on the language test, right? That they usually use for the army. It's like a military applied test.
Oh,
for the indicator.
I think they use it for the US military.
US military.
Yeah. Well, the modern language aptitude test, but it's about 60 years old.
Yeah, and this was that application for you, wasn't it? You wanted to learn Japanese. Was it for Japanese? And they said basically that they didn't think you had the innate ability. And you
yeah. So I did skip a bit out on the story. So originally I applied for a scholarship to go to Japan because I was going to sort of do the plan was to do a PhD in East Asian history, but then they made me take up modern language aptitude test, the MLAT. And I scored so low that they said, no, there's no way your language ability is going to ever be good enough. So sorry, no money for you.
It's fair to say that you had a bit of a bee in your bonnet, shall we say. And is it the case of China was second best or China was second choice?
I think I was just, I was still, quite young. I was just still at university, and I think I just kind of I was like, well, if they don't want me, forget it. I'll go somewhere else. But also, part of it was, they think I can't learn a foreign language. Well, I'm going to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Chinese is supposed to be even more difficult than Japanese, so I'm going to go and learn that. And I mean, it's also cheaper to, if you're talking about foreign language, it's cheaper to study at university in China. At least the cost of living for a lot of things is a bit cheaper, I think. So, but yeah, you make it sound like.
Well, I think it's really fair.
But I think part of my issue was the band descriptions for the MLAT test anyway, because I don't question that maybe I have less natural ability at foreign languages than a lot of other people, but I think it seems like to me a very English language speaking more perspective that if you're not the best at learning foreign languages, then you can't learn them. I think it's human nature to be able to learn foreign languages. Some people might have more aptitude than others, but the grading I was given was unlikely to be successful in learning foreign languages, even though it was closely related to English, which which I just think is a completely wrong description to apply to any human unless they actually have some language development problems.
Lewis,
Everybody's
I wonder if they could hear you speak Chinese now.
well, exactly. So, it's obviously not true. I think, but I think it's only really in the English-speaking world where we think that learning a foreign language is this amazing thing, and you have to be, some kind of like gifted student to be able to successfully learn a foreign language. It's not like that. Everybody's capable of it. It just takes time.
I mean, and the good news is that you did prove the doubters wrong, Lewis, and you were very successful, right? You had a rapid ascent.
Yeah.
You did the HSK 6 within a year and a half. Is that right?
It was about 2 years, but I mean, like, we could go on another discussion on how the HSK.
Yeah, we're going to talk. We will talk more about
it.
Language, but it's just again just to look at the background. And interesting about you, Lewis, your first port of entry was actually Wuhan. That's right. It's the first year.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, all three of us now, we're actually outside of China, and we're caught up in the lockdown. So just for references as well, the date is the 17th of May, 2020. Trevor, you're in the US, in Virginia. Lewis, you're down south in the UK. And Portsmouth, and I'm stuck in the Midlands in the UK. So at the moment we are well and truly in the middle because all three of us also have Chinese wives. And Lewis, you're lucky enough that your wife and your family are with you in Portsmouth, but Trevor's soon to be joined by your wife in the US, getting a very expensive flight. My situation is a little more difficult. My wife's visa is still pending, so our plans are up in the air at the minute. So I think in terms of background, you guys, you're saying that your main driving force heading to China was language based. That you'd put that at the top of the list. Would you say so?
It's why I went. It's not why I stayed. I don't know about you, Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't just language. It was also cultural. I mean, I'd studied East Asian history. I wanted to not just travel, I wanted to experience other countries and cultures. I think I've not met too many people other than sort of pure businessmen that have been sent over to China who have arrived with no interest in culture and history and those things.
Yeah, well, I might break the mold a little bit there, Lewis. It's not so. Just to clarify my position. So I was in China a lot, a shorter time than you guys. So close to 5 years. Between you guys, you've done 20 years, and you have great Chinese language ability. Mine's very middle of the road, not even quite middle of the road. But my impulses for going to China was really, I had just come from Thailand. So my original ambition was just traveling because I sold my business in the UK. I had this crazy idea that I kind of wanted to reach 100 countries and spend an extended time out of the UK. And I ended up in Thailand, as most people do. I spent a year in Thailand, and actually, as well as teaching, I did go to school to learn Thai. I tried taking it quite seriously. And after leaving Thailand, I realized that didn't have much use. So I was always a bit suspect about investing too much of myself in a second language again. So I mean, I'm not going to go on about Thailand too much, but it's very different from China. And the type of expats that end up in Thailand, they are, there's some crossover there, but it's a different country. So I left Thailand, and I was just in a bit of a deliberating situation about where to head off next, whether to go back to England. But I felt I had an unfinished business, and we all three of us, we have a good friend James who was out in Hangzhou. He was teaching English there, so he suggested I head over to China for a year just to check it out, which I did. So I secured a job at an English language school, which was teaching adults. And Lewis, you were working there at the time. And I think when I met you, Trevor, you were in the sports industry, right? That was around
Correct.
Yeah, 5 years ago. and so, you know, my um, grading my impulses for going to China, it was really just a continuation of travel. I did have some interest in the culture, but it wasn't, you know, embedded. I've always had an interest in East Asia, but more Japan and Thailand and Buddhism, because you know, at university I studied religious studies and philosophy, so it was very kind of spiritual orientated, but you know, more philosophical. Um, I certainly didn't have China high on my radar as a place to, you know, think I would reveal a lot about myself. Um, but I was quite pleasantly surprised when I got there. Um, I think my first impressions were, I mean, the wealth was the size of China, and the observable wealth that you see in the cities on the street. It was a bit of a gobsmack for me. Um, but also I didn't have any impulses to make money. I didn't think I would be going to China to make money. It was just a case of just going there to spend a year, try and explore the culture a bit, and then use it as a springboard to carry on traveling. You know, it's got well adapted flight routes through Asia, so I knew I could take more traveling opportunities into Philippines, into Indonesia, and also the job that I took as an English teacher. You can negotiate time off. You know, you can earn not great money when you first get over there, but enough to pay for flights. And I already had, you know, enough money to travel with from being back in the UK, selling my business. So I do think that there are a number of different types of people, maybe expats that you meet in China. And I think definitely one is like you guys, that people go out there definitely searching for the language to learn Chinese. I do think you get people that are travel minded, you know, cultural minded. How about what's your experience when then with the businessmen clientele? You know, the guys that go out there on the back of a foreign business. They're usually based in Shanghai. Because Trevor, you've spent a lot of time in Shanghai, right? So did you mix in those circles with the top echelons of the expats, so we say?
Briefly, you know, a lot of my experience with the business people has been through international schools, which I was involved in through sports. And that's only a portion of the business people that go out. Those are the people that are from major Fortune 500 companies, and they have relocation packages, and they live quite a comfy life in a somewhat of a bubble.
Yeah.
From the rest of China. But a lot of people that are in China, whether they're Chinese or those people themselves, will say that's a dying breed, that these relocation packages are not as available and not as numerous as they were.
Yeah.
And the other breed is like maybe the foreigner who's made a business in China and is already doing import export or outsourcing and is a China hand, so to speak, whether they own a business or whether they are doing other things. That is another type of person that actually, maybe John, you might even fall into that category to some extent.
Yeah, the China hand is something we're going to have to explore, really. The idea of kind of positioning yourself as a middleman. You know, it's not as clear cut as a middleman. It can get a bit murky. But you're looking basically just to connect. So you're already on the ground in China and you're connecting businesses overseas. I think just to track back to the like the Fortune 500 guys, I think you're right. It's all about the bubble. And, you know, Shanghai often gets this stick about saying, you know, Shanghai is a bubble in China. And I kind of agree with it. I mean, I love Shanghai. I like going there, but to me, it does feel very different from other cities in Hangzhou, and you can meet people, you know, foreigners and expats in Shanghai, and they have no Chinese friends at all. They just live in a complete expat bubble, and they're very well looked after, you know, literally from a car from the aeroplane to their service department, a car every day to the office, in an English speaking environment with the best healthcare. You know, and it's a good life for them. I think they
Right.
probably are a dying breed. Some of them work more remotely. A lot of the, they are expensive packages to put in, so companies think twice.
It's just cheaper to hire locally now, and
Yeah,
there's an increasing number of MBA graduates and high specialized labor in China that is bilingual,
yeah,
and it's a fraction of the cost of, everything from the flights and the moving, the apartment, housing stipend, a driver,
mm,
someone to handle all their taxes, and all of this is taken care of for those corporations. And the irony is that all these people are not really, not all of them, but a lot of these people are not planning to China. They're not there for China. They're there as part of their career, and they're tolerating China as part of their career within their company and outside that company. So it's temporary. A lot of them just are on a 2-year or a 3-year circuit.
yeah. Some of them do stay longer term when the money goes up. I think a few of them, a lot of them take their families over. They end up in international schools.
Right.
Occasionally, some of these the guys, maybe they do end up with a Chinese wife somehow and extend their stay over there and integrate. But I know head of accounts for some guy that's gone over from Nivea, and everything's just taken care of him for him every day. It's very different, if from, even as an English teacher, there's a lot of bureaucracy just trying to secure your work permit at first, and supplying the right documents, a lot of messing around. The bureaucratic red tape is a nightmare. But when you're with one of these big companies, that's all sorted for you. They just give you a time, date, book your business class ticket, and in you roll. And then you land in Shanghai, you're eating in one of the burger joints, and that's it. And you're eating burgers in the American restaurants for the most part. Not to take it away from them, but I think that they're quite limited with what they can offer on China. Do you guys know how many foreigners officially live in China?
Is this a Chinese version of foreigner, which is
Well,
essentially
this is
European,
according.
North American?
This is
Well, actually, yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because often when you're thinking about expats going to these companies and stuff, like we're thinking like Americans or Europeans, but actually there's a large number of Japanese, even
yeah,
Hangzhou. That there's like a whole
Korean.
Japanese expat community that
yeah.
we don't even know about because a lot of them don't even speak any English. They speak, but they can speak Chinese. A lot of them. So
Yeah, that's right. So the figures are around about, and these are the Chinese figures. It's around about 1 million. It kind of fluctuates up and down. I'm not sure. I mean, it's probably a lot less now because of the ban on foreigners going in because of COVID. But it's been hovering around 1 million for the past, I think, 4 or 5 years, and 50% of those million actually live in Shanghai. The work permits are issued for Shanghai around that region. So, when you think about it compared to and that's not including business visas and tourist visas. So these are work permit, residence permits. 50% of them are in Shanghai. I think there's around about 200,000 around Beijing area. In the west of China, in central China, I think there's very few work permits issued to foreigners. And obviously, when you're talking about Xinjiang, there's heavy restrictions on things like that. You have to, their visa, there's different visas. You also have the journalist visa as well, which I don't think is classed as a residential visa and can be stopped if it
Can be easily revoked.
Yeah, easily revoked. And we talk about that further down the line. And then you've got the business visas, which are guys coming in and out a lot, over trying to audit factories, look at stuff, maybe some networking, attend trade shows, exhibitions, and they're granted depending what the nationality is of those guys. They dish quite a few of those out, many to the African countries. They can change the rules and regulations of them when they see fit, but you usually have to leave at least every 90 days on those business visas. And then finally, you've got the tourist visas. And surprisingly, like China, I think, ranks as number 2 now in the world as a tourist destination. But it's not. I mean, I think it's around 30 million tourist visas or 35 million. I have to check that. And I think most of them, like you think in all your time in China, like living in Hangzhou, how many groups of Western backpackers or Western parties have you seen walking around China? Have you seen many?
Yeah, well, anytime you travel, when I was on a budget traveling, going to hostels or even couch surfing, there was a lot of backpackers, but mostly they wouldn't be, partially in Hangzhou, but a lot more in Kunming,
Yeah.
Chengdu, and of course the big four cities: Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. So
tour.
I don't know. How about you, Lewis? Do you notice all the travelers?
I mean, I spent when I was at Zhejiang University, I think I spent the last 2 months of my course, or month or so, maybe 6 weeks of my course, living in a hostel, and I met a lot of people that were, they were traveling around China, and obviously, I've done bits of traveling around China as well, like when in my free time, and I've met quite a lot of people, but I mean, whether it's number 2 on the world tourist destination.
Well, I think that's it. With the visas, really, I think because of the amount of tourist visas that they issue, a lot of it is just for families, for overseas Chinese or have been naturalized to another nationality, and they're taking tourist visas maybe back into China to see extended family. They can get an ancestry visa, right? But a lot of them don't apply for it, and you can get I think rejected for it as well quite easily, especially if you've got relations in Taiwan and you try and apply for an ancestor visa. So I think quite a few of these the big figures for the tourist visas, you've still got people working illegally in China that are just on a tourist visa, going in and out and bouncing every, especially in Guangzhou area, they just bounce over to Hong Kong and then come back in. So they would take up a large portion of these visas, and then you've got Chinese people, ethnically Han Chinese who have been living overseas, and then they come back to China to visit relatives. Yeah,
that sense as a Chinese sort of diaspora that you've got a lot of people that are coming back on tourist visas. But do they not have like family visiting visas? If they're,
they do, but I think there's a lot more scrutiny on them. And so sometimes just the tourist visa is easy to take. If you're just going over for a spring festival, I think for 2 weeks, a lot of people just take in the tourist visa. But there are shall we say, genuine tourists in China. They usually follow the pre-laid route of going to the Great Wall, Xi'an, down to Xi'an to Terracotta, Guilin. A lot of them hover around the warmer areas as well, because a lot of these backpackers, they don't bring winter clothes. So that's in the southern parts of China. But I think compared to the rest of Southeast Asia as a golden tourist destination, shall we say, for backpackers that look to cut loose, I don't think China really is on the same level as the Philippines or Thailand or Cambodia. Certainly, I've met thousands. Well, I wouldn't say thousands, but hundreds of backpackers in the past 10 years. And the amount of people that just say, "Yeah, I'm traveling around Asia, but I'm cutting out China." That's they show me their route, what they're doing, and it's like, yeah, well, I'm not really going to do China. So they are there, and the Airbnb was big at one point, Trevor, but they've stopped it, haven't they? I think it's really difficult to use it at the minute for a foreigner. Is that right?
In mainland?
Yeah, mainland. Airbnb.
Maybe.
Because you have to register whenever you stay somewhere. You have to register at the local police station.
Yeah. So, and I think the owner has to go with you. So I think most Airbnb owners kind of just gave up. They found it.
There's some smaller hotels where if you walk in, you look foreign, they just say, "Nope, we won't have you," because they can't bother doing the paperwork to register you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Or whether they're allowed to do the paperwork to register you, I'm not sure. But I've had that experience where I've just been told no foreigners in
Yeah.
our hotel. So.
Yeah, I think we're going to come on to that about the amount of registration that you do get onto as a foreigner. You know, you pretty much have to register from the minute you get off the plane, where you should be known where you are at any one point really in China, whether what hotel, where you're sleeping that night, or you
Who
know,
you're sleeping with.
who you're sleeping with. Yeah. So yeah, so just getting back to the type of people that end up in China. How about the more sinister type? So we all know English teachers. I mean, English teachers are a huge part of getting out to China. It's the biggest market in the world, and I should say that's kind of what I'm largely involved with now, is recruiting English teachers and onboarding them for getting them over to China to the right school. And you know, it can be a bit of a murky business. It's competitive. The demand is high, and you know, the demand's still there even with this COVID outbreak. Now, what was it like in terms of the English teaching quality, or shall we say the people that were going back to 2009, 2010? Because I wasn't there then. What was it like? It was a question of they just take anyone back then?
You want to answer that, Lewis?
I think you mean for the EFL industry in general and the whole China, because it's
I'm talking about the idea of well, I mean, China.
you mean how easy it is for somebody to get a job if they want to teach English in China?
And can back then, could a non-native get a job easily? Like, you're from Russia, you want to speak English. You're from any European or South American country, you want to teach English. Was it just only you could get a job?
I mean, I've met people who were teaching English, and their English was perhaps not as good as the students they were supposed to be teaching, but because they had the right skin color, shall we say, they were given a job. So
right.
How about you,
That's what I was gonna say as well. I mean, there's a harsh reality that they're definitely gonna want to interview you, and it won't be over the phone. They'll want a video interview, or they'll want a photo of you before you're gonna get the job as a teacher in China. And being a speaker wasn't always a prerequisite. Yeah, but
I think we can get definitely in the future get really deep into Chinese HR and how that relates to generalizations and things. I mean,
the mythical animal, Chinese HR.
Chinese HR is quite a special breed. But put it this way: if you've got a resume in English and it's going over to Chinese HR, they will not look at the words. It will be your photo, and if there's no photo on it, especially as an English teacher, they will ask you to send a photo, and then you will not get a response until that photo is received. That's still the case now, but I think it's clear. They back in 2017. So I was out there by then because I didn't arrive until 2015. They then came up with these new stipulations, basically saying that non-natives or people that don't hold passports from England, Ireland, Australia, Canada, America, and South Africa. And South Africa was a bit of a grey area because only some provinces accepted that. You couldn't get a job as an English teacher. There were some ways around it. If, for example, if you attended a university in America or Canada or UK. So they made a conscious effort to try and clean up the industry. There's some rumors about why they did. Did you hear the rumor about, because it was I think one of the top guys in Beijing, he discovered his daughter was being taught by a Ukrainian girl, and apparently she'd been marketing herself as an American native English teacher, and then finally it came to realization that she was actually Ukrainian, and then it kind of was the catalyst to drive home this big change in the industry. So when it comes to meeting expats in general, do you think they fall into categories? Do you think we're looking at the darker side of the expat industry here? What kind of people have you met, Lewis?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it's difficult to just categorize people. But I've definitely, you've met people who maybe when you're talking to them, you're thinking, why did you come to China? You, like, was it because you were, you know, yeah, unfortunately, like with the, like you said, with the EFL teachers, like 10 years ago, it was quite easy for somebody who wasn't even native English speaker to get a job. And you think, like, did you come to China because you couldn't get a job back home, or
Yeah.
like,
There's a bit of a distrust, isn't there, about some, with some English teachers, and even many of the Chinese themselves think, why are you in China? Did you fail in your own country? What are you doing here? You must have been rejected. Certainly, it depends what kind of institution you're teaching at. If you're at an international school, they tend not to think that so much. You're, one of the better places. But I think a lot of the English teachers originally, they could go, especially if they were from Russia or from Eastern Europe, they were going over there for financial reasons. That was their main reason. I just want to try and make a link with Southeast Asia, okay, to maybe highlight a bit of a difference. Sure, as most people know, Southeast Asia has a heavy reputation for what we call sexpats. Basically, maybe usually older guys, middle-aged at least, from the West, maybe America, maybe UK, Australia, going over to Asia and basically just trying to hook up with women. Maybe some of this is paid for. Maybe some of this is a bit suspect. Have you guys found that in China at all?
No, it's more of an exception than
Yeah.
a common trend. And definitely in the last few years I was in China, it seemed like a lot of the shops with the pink lights that everyone just knew, right on the main streets, on the first row, they started closing, more and more of them. But
yeah, I think it's rampant in Southeast Asia. I mean, that is it's in your face, and it's there. I've probably met a handful of guys in China that kind of they were, shall we say, looking for the darker side, and they couldn't really find it, and then they ended up leaving. To go, we usually go back to Thailand or go to the Philippines or go to Cambodia or whatever. So I think they really kind of, shall we say, the expats who are really looking to destroy themselves or get dark or have a serious alcohol problem or a serious drug problem and are sex addicts, they're not so much in China anymore. There are heavy drinkers. And I think a few years back, there was a blind eye turned to drug use, right? Would you say that's fair enough, Trevor? Or not? Obviously not.
I turned to drug use in China.
Yeah, I think we'd certainly. I mean, obviously we're not going to name any, but I was aware that it was going on back in 2015 when I first arrived. There were expats who were openly.
There was a lot more exceptions for foreigners in general.
Yeah,
and there's a double standard, we should say, for foreigners in that.
Yeah, definitely.
If a Chinese person commits a crime versus a foreigner commits a crime, the Chinese person is going to get punished much worse.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario, a foreigner gets deported.
Yeah.
And fined. So versus a Chinese person could end up in prison for something that would be considered in the US or the UK a very minor infraction, with minimal evidence that they were even involved in it. But yeah, in the last 5 years, that's changed a lot, especially in Shanghai, where I was in the last 2 years. There was rampant stories of bars, for example, sports bars where friends would meet on the evenings and the weekends to watch sporting matches and to have a drink, and they were being raided, and there was a blockade at the front and the back of the bar. This was thousands of cases,
Yeah.
and I'm sure throughout the rest of China, where they would do drug tests, and you couldn't leave the building until they did a drug test. But yeah, certainly 5 years ago, that was not the case. But there was definitely strict punishment for illegal drug use.
Yeah.
And it was not common from any of even the most social friends I had of Chinese friends were not very involved.
Yeah, it's not common. Well, I think we can talk about that maybe a bit more, later. But I think things like illicit activity, drugs in China, it kind of gets caught in pockets in cities, right? It's never really widespread. I remember being in Xi'an, and I noticed the taxi drivers in Xi'an, they were using meth. I mean, you can tell that they're, of some kind of speed. They were really edgy. They had foreign dance music on. It was really surreal. And talking to a few Chinese friends, they did say, yeah, around the area of China, there's some factories, and then it goes down to Laos, and they push it through to Thailand, and so kind of you end up with these pockets in cities where there's certain problems. But certainly in Hangzhou.
Sure. In Guangzhou, they had, which I never saw when I was in Shanghai or Wuhan, but they actually, like in residential areas, they had like adverts of sort of cartoons of like somebody hanging on someone's been loose, and it's like, the death penalty for drug dealers, and they have a lot of propaganda, or like, sort of a lot of kind of like warning adverts about sort of drug dealing and drug offenses and things. But I found that one kind of shocking, where it was actually like a cartoon of, like somebody being hanged on a noose, and it was sort of, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was about, sort of drug dealers getting death penalty, which I hadn't seen in other cities. But yeah, it kind of makes sense with, I guess, where Guangzhou is. If there's sort of, the drugs trade is going to go through to Southeast Asia, then it's going to get a lot more caught up in there.
Do you think it's fair to say, like 5 years ago, and certainly going back before I was there, when you guys first arrived, like 2009, 2010, foreigners kind of had a golden ticket? Would that be the right way to describe it? You could get away with a lot. You were treated like royalty, and China really wanted foreigners there at that point. It was post Beijing Olympics. They were looking to expand, and a lot of people had by all accounts and speaking, had a great time. And I think there was a blind eye turned to a lot of behavior, whether it was drug use, whether it was, sexual transgressions. It was quite hard to get punished as a foreigner in China, right? Like 5 years ago. I mean, you had to do something pretty bad. I remember speaking to a guy who said he was the first foreigner to be arrested in Beijing. In Binjiang, an area of Hangzhou, and apparently the police had never even arrested a foreigner there until 2014, I think he said, and that was for fighting in a bar, but that's definitely changed. The past few, going back to the past 2 or 3 years, they really are looking to clean up, shall we say, the quality of foreigner that they have in the country. And this is going into drug tests, and it's not just blood tests, it's hair testing, which can be for 3 months. So you've got stories of, guys in America where smoking weed is legal. They may, even if they're using it for medical purposes, they have a medical certificate. They fly over to China to start a teaching job. 2 weeks into the job, they maybe get pulled aside to do a hair test. And obviously, this marijuana can stay in their blood system for up to 3 months, and then they test positive. And it's a crime, it's a crime in China to have it in your blood. It's not just it's the same as possession. So they to me, they do seem to be enforcing the rules, and the rules have always been there, right? They just haven't been enforced. It's like this golden ticket syndrome. So where at this point, I think we finish off to say, where do you stand on this then, with China looking to clean up the quality of foreigner in their country? do you fully sympathize with it, Trevor? Do you think it's like, where do you think their strategy is? Do you think like it's, you know, other countries would do equally the same thing?
No, other countries won't do the same thing, but I think if you were completely ignorant of the possibility of this happening, then you're too naive to really survive and enjoy some of the complexity and some of the harsh realities that come with living in China. It is not like, it's not like other countries. Definitely, it's very top down, and getting into it as a foreigner uniquely, I mean, this problem of overregulation, and we can talk in later episodes about this, and the involvement in your personal life and the controls and the straight and narrow that people are expected to be on, and the change of that in the last 5, well, technically 8 years since 2013. I wonder what happened then. What has been more and more pervasive. All of these, all of the public sector getting more involved, and the surveillance getting involved, and it's not unique to foreigners, you know. And the Chinese are dealing with this too, and most Chinese are not complaining about it as much. It's just, and maybe having that golden ticket and having a second standard above local people is not a healthy thing for local people or for Chinese. So I think it sucks and it's harsh and it doesn't work and it doesn't help the economy and there's limitations to it. But you need to realize that's China.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with that. It's, to be diplomatic about it, if they couldn't allow one rule for one and let it slide with for the other, you know, if the Chinese locals were being held to this same account, I think it was naturally it was going to transcend onto the foreigners. And also, you know, it was making, you often see these press reports and in Chinese media where a foreigner will make a mistake, whether it can be quite an innocent mistake, like eating on the subway or something like this, and you know, they will absolutely be tortured by Chinese media and the local citizens. And a lot of it is kind of, there's a bit of a background resentment, you know, really, that they think, well, there's one rule for them, one rule for us. So they want everyone being held account to the same standard. Whether it's the right thing or not, you know, we can talk about that later. How about you, Lewis?
I mean, I think it's nothing unique to China that they want to improve the quality of, you know, foreigners, non-natives coming into their country, right? I think you know, most countries have you know, if not governments, then at least sections of their population that are pushing for stronger laws and immigration and things like that. So I don't think that's anything you know, unique to China. But yeah, I mean, if you look online at what's up, you know, and you can always, when you start looking at comments online on social media and things, and what people are saying, you can always get very skewed. I think people's opinions they put forward, particularly when they're kind of anonymous online, are a lot more extreme than they would necessarily be if you're talking to them face to face, or if it was a video like this where people could see who you were. But yeah, you can see a lot of very, you know, anti-Western, at least, sentiment on online, and it's definitely, I've definitely seen it increasing more in the past few years, to the point that I stopped using a lot of those kind of like, you know, sort of Chinese social media where you would see these kind of comments, because I just can't be bothered with it.
Well, yeah, I think that's you know, that's getting to the point why we're doing this this video, you know, because I think there needs to, it's very polarized. It really is becoming a case of us and them, how it's being delivered in the media, and also, you know, the how social media is used with these videos on YouTube, with Instagram accounts. It's getting very savvy now, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that is being paid for directly by, or at least supported indirectly by the powers that be in China. And then
propaganda.
They're called a Wu Mao, right? Is that right?
Oh yeah, we can talk about Wu Mao later.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very real. And the thing is, because it's so polarized, you've got this anti-China sentiment, and then you've got this pro-nationalistic sentiment. There really hasn't been much middle ground. And I think, with 25 years between us out there, and we can, maybe at least talk it out, or try and find, look in a bit more detail about the reasons why these things are happening. Because I think at some point there has to be like a real big, push for some kind of around the table diplomacy. Otherwise, it might not end too well. We're kind of living in uncertain times at the moment. And I think that's where I'm going to sign off with my opinion at the moment, is that these times are uncertain, and I'm willing to sit around the table and try and find the reasoning why, and try and come up with a solution. How about you, Trevor?
Let's figure this out.
Figure it out. Yeah, let's figure it out. All right, so, Lewis, do you want to say any final words?
No, I've got nothing to add on top of that.
Well, I think hopefully, once we get the hang of this, we're going to go into details, topics in more detail, bring a bit of fun and life to it, maybe get a bit more editing, sort my background out a bit. I think really the aim of this one was just a bit of an introduction to who we are, a bit of a background, talk about how we ended up in China, and then we can start looking at issues in a bit more detail, and obviously the C word, the coronavirus, is going to come up a bit. But there's a hell of a lot of things to talk about, and we will address the main things. The big issues that people talk about in China are Xinjiang and the Uyghurs and to Tibet, all these things. But actually, what I think we're fine. I don't think they're the main issues. I actually think some of that are sidetrack issues, and there are other things to talk about in China, and we can go into that in more detail.
You mean,
all right, guys?
We're not trying to get demonetized on YouTube, is what you're saying?
No, I don't think we're gonna. I doubt we're gonna get any subscribers for a while. But I think at least we can put it out there and see what happens. But we. I think between us, and we've got a lot of friends out there. All three of us were based in Hangzhou for a number of years, which I think is a good a city in China as a good indicator, because it's not in the same bubble as Shanghai. It's also heavily connected to the CCP in Beijing because of the connections with Xi Jinping in Hangzhou. It's got a lot of money being put into it because of the industries out there, the high-tech industries, and obviously it's the headquarters of Alibaba. So it's kind of one of the big cities just under the fringe. It's not like Shenzhen or Shanghai or Beijing, but it's very relevant. And so I think you can get a good insight into China, and certainly middle class China as well. And overall, I think we've got some unique experience, and maybe we can offer something here in terms of dialogue. All right, guys. Okay. I think we're in this first episode, and I'll stop the recording.